Good morning, everyone. Hope you're all having a wonderful day today. Today, we're going to be talking about ambidextrous receiver sets. This one specifically is from Next Level Armory and is their Ambi billet lower plus their billet upper. Now, full disclosure on this receiver set is that Next Level Armory did send them to me for free, so I did not pay for them whatsoever. So talking about ambidextrous receiver sets in general for just a moment, we have seen these, especially the lowers, become more and more popular of late. No less than a half dozen companies have come out with their own ambidextrous lower receiver to varying degrees of success, and I do see why people want them to have more control from the firing grip and be able to more effectively clear malfunctions or just to operate the firearm is a noble pursuit. However, if that is not executed properly and the implementation is subpar, we can run into a certain set of issues. So while trying to solve one problem, we've now created a set of other problems for us to deal with. So now let's go ahead and get into this. Starting off with probably the most important component for most of you, that is going to be the lower. This is a truly fully ambidextrous lower receiver. So you have two magazine releases, two bolt catches and bolt releases as well. For the right-handed user, you now have a rocker switch that acts as your bolt catch and your bolt release, which is great for clearing malfunctions and also for your super tactical reloads. Now, moving on to the magazine well, this has been enlarged and flared. It is a very good enhancement over a standard mil-spec lower receiver, something that I personally like to see. Yes, it does add a tiny bit of bulk and weight, but again, for me personally, I do like it. It makes those reloads a little bit easier. Now, on top of that, you also have an enhanced trigger guard. So if you're using gloves in cold weather, anything like that, you do have a little bit of extra room. On top of that, there's just some nice touches on the lower receiver, like texturing where you're going to rest your finger when you're not actively shooting on it. And again, the whole thing just feels nice. Now, you also have enhanced and slightly lengthened takedown pins, which again, they just feel nice. They don't really matter all that much in terms of function, but they look nice and they feel nice when you need to take it apart. Now, on the left-hand side of the lower receiver, you have your secondary magazine release, which as a right-handed shooter, you will probably never use, and this is actually going to be one of the downsides of the lower receiver, which we'll talk about in just a minute. Subjectively, I do like the aesthetics. It's a nice blend of form and function without getting too much into the tactic cringe style that you'll see on some lower receivers that go a little bit more overboard. I do like the right-handed controls for the most part, and again, that left-handed mag release, not necessarily my favorite. As far as the feels go, it is quite good. Now, with the rocker switch that you get for the bolt release and bolt hold, it will not work with some upper receivers. It will work with every mil-spec upper that I've tried, but some billet upper receivers, if they have different cuts, they obviously won't accept the rocker switch on the right-hand side, including the M4E1 from Arrow. Just the way that that interfaces doesn't quite work with the rocker panel on the NLA lower. Now, of course, they sell this as a set. However, I have used this with a bunch of other upper receivers, and again, there can be some compatibility issues in there if you're not using it with their upper. Talking about the upper receiver, it is of course billet and it does match the lower in terms of fit and aesthetics. You don't have any forward assist, which is not a big problem for a kind of nicer end build, not necessarily a duty focused build, but kind of just a nice build. It's not that big of a deal. You do have M4 feed ramps in the upper receiver. One thing that I do want to say about the cuts and angles on this billet upper receiver is that at the front, it is too wide at the hips to accept some handguards. So specifically, this is a Geisley Mark 13 rail that I had to mutilate the anti-rotation tabs on it to get it to fit over the upper receiver, because the upper and lower combo is about $500 and this handguard is about $300, so it lost out the battle. So I did have to modify the handguard to get it to fit. However, the way it fits now, it will never shift. Now, on top of the upper receiver, of course, you have a full Picatinny rail that is scalloped out in the center for aesthetics and to lighten it up just a little bit. And in the back, you actually have a slight cutout in the tang for your iron sights, so that if your aperture is down, they can actually lay perfectly flat, which is, again, just a nice touch. Now, these do match very well. The fit between the upper and lower, as you would expect for a receiver set, a more expensive receiver set, The fitment is very good, everything lines up properly, and they work very well together, and again, the aesthetics match. If you like the looks, if you like some of the enhanced functionality of the enhanced magazine well, and of course the ambidextrous controls on the right-hand side, it looks good and it functions well. Now, getting into the issues that I have with this receiver set. Number one, as I mentioned, the cost, $525 is steep for a stripped upper and lower receiver. Now, of course, on the lower, it does come with all the components that you need, the proprietary components, but anything else that you're going to put in there, grips, fire control unit, so on and so forth, that's all going to be on you. So it is fairly expensive, and that right there is going to knock it out of contention for a lot of you guys, because I know my guys are very value focused, and this just isn't. This is more of a aesthetics plus function. And getting into function, I do have a problem with the Ambi mag release that will bump and drop mags when you're wearing gear, specifically belts.
All right. Oh, there it is.
So on the left-hand side of the lower receiver, you have a magazine release with very little fencing, and I guess if you were a left-handed shooter, it would be very nice to allow you to quickly drop the magazine, as opposed to having to reach up with your support hand to grip and rip. However, when you're slinging the rifle down at your side, and for me, I'm usually wearing a belt when I'm out on the flat range, and it has a tendency to bump the mag release on the left-hand side of the lower, and then drop the magazine, which is quite obnoxious. I've had it happen anywhere from 3 to 6 times at this point after 2 or 3 months. So it's not that it happens all the time, but it does have a unacceptable proclivity to do so. Now, fortunately, the fix is fairly easy to do. They just need to reduce the size of the magazine release itself or add in some additional fencing. And again, because this is a billet lower and upper receiver, they can do whatever they want with it in terms of function. So I would add a little bit of fencing around it to make it harder to accidentally release, or I would just reduce the size of the magazine release itself. Again, that's on the left-hand side for the right-handed shooter, which again is most of us. Now, number 3, this is a personal issue, is that the rocker panel is just a little bit further away than I would like, and I do personally have small hands. That reach is a little far to hit the top of the rocker panel to get good leverage to actually drop the bolt when I want to. Now, that is only for the bolt release segment. If I want to lock it back open, of course, that's super easy, very easy to do. Excellent upgrade from a standard mil-spec lower receiver. However, again, that rocker panel, for me personally, to hit the top with my small little fingers means I have to adjust my grip slightly. Just a minor gripe that I personally have. Again, for most of you, probably not going to be an issue. So for me, while I like using it, subjectively, I like the looks, I like the feels, that sort of stuff, it does need a couple small changes. I would redo the geometry in the front to be more accepting of different handguards. I would add a little bit more fencing, or again, fix the Ambi mag release so that it doesn't inadvertently drop your magazine when you don't want it to. And that's about it. Oh, and a drop in price, because I do think that $525 for just a stripped set of upper and lower is too expensive. So for me, while I like using it, subjectively, I like the looks, I like the feels, that sort of stuff, it does need a couple small changes. I would redo the geometry in the front to be more accepting of different handguards. I would add a little bit more fencing, or again, fix the Ambi mag release so that it doesn't inadvertently drop your magazine when you don't want it to. And that's about it. Oh, and a drop in price, because again, $525 for a stripped upper and lower, even if they are nice, even if I do personally like them, I just think that's a little too expensive for most people. So with all of that out of the way, guys, let me know what you think of the NLA Ambi receiver set, what you like and don't like about it, and if you think that $525 asking price is a little too steep. But once again, with all that out of the way, guys, thank you so much for watching. I hope you all enjoyed. I will see you in the next one. Peace off.